Hi guys, and welcome back to our second bit of the lesson on our second factor which affects the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, which is anxiety. Hopefully you've taken a little bit of time away from this kind of lesson now to digest some of the stuff on misleading information, and you're ready to make a start on now this kind of like second factor. Good news is for you lot that anxiety is way easier. It's way more straightforward, and you won't have to listen to me droning on for 25 minutes in a video to explain it all. So so let's get stuck in then straight away with the definition, which is what we had for misleading information. So in the context of an eyewitness testimony, anxiety is a state of emotional and physical arousal in response to a stressful situation. Now the emotions that we would normally have in response to a stressful situation are, we might worry, alright, so over worry, and we might be experiencing kind of feelings of tension and panic. The physical effects, however, you're already familiar with from what you've done on biopsychology. So the physical effects of stress or anxiety are literally fight or flight. So when we experience a stressful situation, i.e. we witness a crime, then we supposedly go through this state of anxiety where we're worried, and we've also got the fight or flight, increased breathing rate, increased heart rate, feeling a little bit sick. We've got all that to contend with. Now, just before we make a move forward, I just want to point out to you here, because a lot of students wrongly assume the nature of anxiety and what effect it will have. Anxiety in the context of eyewitness testimony is actually beneficial to us as an eyewitness. Kind of goes against what you would all assume, right? And you normally think that if you're anxious then you can't pay attention. These bits of research that we're going to look at actually go against that idea. So all of the studies are looking at the positive effects of anxiety on the accuracy of an eyewitness account. So let's just have a look at our first study. So Christensen and Burnett, as you can see in the yellow at the top of the screen, they were indeed trying to prove that anxiety actually has a positive effect on recall, and it improves your memory. So what they were doing is they were investigating witnesses to a real crime, okay? So to investigate whether anxiety can have a positive effect on eyewitness recall when the event in question involved a real threat to one's life. So these people in this particular piece of research were 110 real-life eyewitnesses who had each witnessed bank robberies in Sweden. Now, when Christensen and Burnett were investigating this, they determined that over the course of that bank robbery, the eyewitnesses had actually been separated into two separate groups. So even though it sounds like it kind of like might not be experimental, it is actually a natural experiment, this piece of research, because a naturally occurring independent variable has created two separate groups of people. So that makes it an independent measure design, and it makes it a natural experiment. The IV is a naturally occurring event that separates the two groups of people. So what was that naturally occurring event then? They all witnessed this bank robbery, okay, but some were classed as merely onlookers. So in this case, they were classed as being low anxiety. Some people in this particular event were bank clerks, and those people had actually been directly threatened by the robbers. Apologies about that, by the robbers. These were therefore classed as the high anxiety condition. Now the procedure is that Christensen and Burnett, all they wanted to do was investigate the dependent variable. Remember, it's a natural experiment, so they're not manipulating anything here. They are simply interested in the fact that this event occurred, and they want to go and have a look at what the dependent variable was. So the interviews by Christensen and Burnett with witnesses were conducted between 4 and 15 months after the event. Now this is known as a longitudinal study. We have mentioned this to you briefly before, but a longitudinal study takes place over an extended period of time. So interviews took place between 4 and 15 months after they'd actually witnessed the bank robbery. Now, if we look at the results, it says that all witnesses actually showed good memories for the details of the robbery itself. So they had better than 75% recall. In this study, all of the participants only lost 25% of the original detail, which, as I've said here, is really, really amazing, okay? That they only lose a quarter of the information. They all had exceptional memories. In fact, what we see here is that the high anxiety witnesses actually had the best recall of all. So these findings show that anxiety, like I pointed out to you a few minutes ago, doesn't have a negative effect. It actually helps us. It actually makes our recall more accurate, okay, as a positive effect on us. So therefore the conclusion here is that anxiety will improve the accuracy of an eyewitness account, okay? So that's our first study, Christensen and Burnett. If you want to be filling in your summary sheet as I'm going through it, that's fine. If you want to wait until we get to the end, that's fine as well. But I'm going to move you on to now the second piece of research. So the second piece of research here is the study by Yulin and Cook. Now the reason why I've just gone through this very, very quickly is because you have already actually studied the Yulin and Cook piece of research. You did it, all right, as contradictory evidence against the effects of misleading information. So you should be able to, in your booklet now, complete the blanks based on what information you already have, okay? So Yulin and Cook, we know, were investigating the effect of anxiety on eyewitness memory for a real-life event. They investigated witnesses to a real-life armed robbery in, so you need to tell me the country. Then you need to tell me how long after the event did they go back to the witnesses. The difference here is that in this particular version of the study that Yulin and Cook were reporting, is they were also asked to rate how stressed they had felt at the time of the crime on a scale of 1 to 7. Now, witnesses who reported the highest stress level were more accurate than those reporting lower levels. So 88% of information was correctly recalled by those experiencing high stress levels, and only 75% reported by those who were supposedly experiencing low levels. So again, this shows to us that anxiety improves the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. So that piece of research should be really, really straightforward because you've already seen it before. Now, if we just go backwards, you'll notice that I skipped over some of the research methods questions. We already know that Christensen and Burnett was an example of a natural experiment because the IV of high stress or low stress, i.e. the clerk or an onlooker, was naturally occurring, so we know that one. However, if your knowledge of research methods is not great at this point, then you need to think carefully about how to answer this second question. So what are the weaknesses of a natural experiment? They take place in a natural environment which therefore can't be replicated, and we have no idea whether there are other extraneous variables which might affect the result. So using your knowledge of research methods and what I've just said to you there, try to answer that question there, question 2, but use the correct terminology, okay? So try to do that for me now, and as with the previous section, your teacher will be going back through these research methods questions with you and seeing if you can answer them in class, okay? Now, once you've done that, you might want to pause me here, but once you've done that, we're going to move straight forward onto the evaluation. I said to you that this was a lot quicker than the stuff on misleading information. So one of the reasons is that the first evaluation point is, again, methodology stuff. Now, if you recall what I said to you at the end of the first video on misleading information, these methodology points should be really, really easy for you to do. If you're familiar with those general ideas of, for example, ecological validity, mundane realism, internal validity and reliability, all you've got to be able to do is apply these points to the studies that we've just looked at. So this research, in terms of anxiety research, is all high in ecological validity and mundane realism. Why? Because they're natural experiments, so they're carried out on real life witnesses and in real life settings. So you need to now complete these examples. I've given you some prompts, so give one example of how the setting was real. Therefore, that bit's going to demonstrate the ecological validity. And then on the right hand side, you also need to give one example of how the task of recalling what they've witnessed is actually true to real life as well. So these witnesses, why was the study high in ecological validity to do with the setting, and why were the task of interviewing them, okay, why was that also real? Why do they have mundane realism? So everybody now try and fill that in for me. Again, pause me a little while here and then come back to me. Okay, so you should have been able to get those examples written in there. If you have any problems, please feel free to send me an email about this topic area, because it's me who's put it all together. So you just need to find me on the email list or through Cedar. It's Fiona Lunt, and just send me a quick question, quick query, and I'll obviously try and help you out. So if we look at the conclusion then, this means that the finding that anxiety has a positive effect on recall can be generalised out to real life eyewitnesses. So this, in case you haven't already sussed it out, is the direct opposite to the point that we made about misleading information research. They were all bits of lab research. These ones are natural experiments, so they are the opposites of one another. These ones are high in ecological validity, the experimental studies are really low, okay? So these methodology points, very, very straightforward. However, okay, one weakness, because they are natural experiments, means that they lack in internal validity. So these studies are natural experiments, therefore variables have not been manipulated and extraneous variables have not been controlled. Now, because this is a little bit more of a difficult point for you to understand, I've inserted one here. So in the Christensen and Burnett study, we do not know exactly how much difference there was in the stress levels of the witnesses. Because we've not manipulated that independent variable and it's all occurred naturally, you cannot have any control over how far away they were from the bank robber. So Christensen and Burnett knew that there were two different types of people who had witnessed it, but did they actually get their rulers out or their tape measures and say, you were 2 meters away from the bank robber, so therefore you were a clerk and you were in the high anxiety condition, and you were 3 meters away from the bank robber in the opposite direction, so you were simply an onlooker. We're not really sure about that, okay? So because these natural experiments, we're not manipulating anything and we're not eliminating extraneous variables, we find it really, really difficult to actually establish cause and effect here. We don't know for certain, they don't know for certain, that anxiety has actually caused the positive effect on recall. It might have been something ludicrous to do with their positioning, all right, their perspective maybe, i.e. how much of the crime they actually witnessed. Were they at a dodgy angle, all right? Things like that. So these natural experiments are totally lacking in the ability to establish cause and effect, because you as a researcher are not in control of kind of like standardising and controlling everything. So that's one of the weaknesses. If we move it forward, okay, to the final evaluation point here, I do want some of you to try and stretch yourselves at this stage. So one additional weakness is that there are contradictory findings. So both of the studies that we've looked at, Christensen and Burnett and Yulin and Cook, say that anxiety has a positive effect. Meta-analysis from Deffenbacher finds that the outcome is not always that straightforward. They did a study of studies of 21 pieces of research. 9 of them showed that high anxiety levels were linked to increased accuracy, but the other 12 showed that high anxiety was linked to decreased accuracy. So we've already said on the previous page that you can't establish cause and effect. This therefore creates even more problems, because what you've got, as you can see in the purple, is a total mismatch of findings. Which way round does it go? So this means it is very, very difficult to establish a clear conclusion. In reality, there is no one simple, thick and fast rule that states the effects anxiety has on an eyewitness memory. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. Now, whilst you all need to know that point, some of you who are aiming for B's and A's could also try to bring in some information on what is known as the Yerkes-Dodson curve, okay? So I've given you my own little illustration of what the Yerkes-Dodson curve is and how it affects us. But if you want to find out some more information, I have put the little link here. You'll have to type it in for yourself, but if I just open that up, you'll see, hopefully, if it works, that it takes you straight through to Simply Psychology, all right? And if you scroll down, you'll see a little bit of information, a little bit further. Okay, I think I've gone past it. You should see a little bit of information here, all right? So anxiety and stress, this kind of like relationship about the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and if you click on that little link there, all right, so that little video clip, it'll also bring up some further information. So not everyone has got to do that, all right? There's loads of you who we know are aiming for C grades or below, okay? You really, really don't need to necessarily go back and have a look through that material, okay? So we got one additional weakness then. Now the two weaknesses, if you're going for B grades, then you'd probably need to try and stretch yourself, okay, and get the two weaknesses on there. If you're going for C grade or below, then you probably just need one strength or two strengths if you can hack it, and then one weakness. So let's just have a look at this just for kind of like everyone's sake, all right, because some people will get round to it. One additional weakness is that all these studies do not account for individual differences, okay? So this is because some individuals benefit from being anxious and actually recall more accurately. The opposite is true of others. So for example, for myself, I do not benefit from being anxious. Being anxious means that I can't focus, it clouds my judgment, I will get really, really stressed out and I'll forget to do stuff. Some people, bit of anxiety, bit of stress, it really, really helps them. It really motivates them, it gives them a bit of clarity, a bit of purpose. So what you need to do there for me is you need to read this little appendix material. Now you can either pause it and read it off the screen here, or it is in your booklet on page 67. So everybody just do that for me now, okay? Remember, it's only the bit on Bothwell. So pause me, have a little go at typing in or writing in that explain, and then we'll come back and just have a look at the conclusion in a few seconds. Okay, so to finish that off then, we've got our final conclusion in this whole area. We're very nearly at the end of eyewitness testimony. This means the effect of anxiety on eyewitness testimony is actually down to an interaction between a number of factors. These include the personality of the witness, and it is not just all about anxiety, okay? One eyewitness will not remember the same as the second eyewitness because they are entirely different people. That's what we mean by individual differences, okay? So now then guys, that's all of your booklet filled in. So, again, same as with the other one, if you want to pause it here and have a go at filling in your big summary sheet, and these are really, really helpful so that you can kind of just stick them up on your wall and then it's all done for you and you can kind of look at that. So if you want to have a go at filling in that summary sheet, or if you've been doing that whilst we've been working through it, then what are your next steps? So you've already been given an essay template on the effects of misleading information, okay? However, I've not given you one for discuss research into the effects of anxiety, because I want you to come up with your own. You should have gathered throughout this little video tutorial that not everybody's essay is going to be the same. You're all going to say things differently, you're all going to use different points, you're going to structure them in different orders. So go nuts, all right? Make an essay template that works for you, all right? If that question comes up in the exam, you know what your answer is. You do not have to learn it exactly as it is in the booklet. We are not expecting you all to learn these stock essay templates. It's a template for a reason. It can be moved, it can be manipulated. So make your own essay template now. Then what you need to do for me, please, is you need to try and answer question 5B using the information on pages 57 to 60 of your booklet to help you, okay? So that's what I want you to do. Next, once you've done with all that, what now? Okay, we're right at the end of this lesson. Now obviously this is flipped learning at its finest, okay? It's a massive chunk of information that we've given you to have a look at. So during your test lesson on this, there will be several different things that I've prepared for you. There's going to be a numbers round. How well do you know your figures for eyewitness testimony? There's going to be a quick fire quiz on Kahoot for those of you who want us to do more Kahoots. There's going to be some exam questions, and then there's unfortunately going to be a big 12-mark timed essay. So what can you do? You can create some cue cards condensing this information. The app versions are being used by loads of you at this point in time, so keep doing them. If you want to send me them, I know a lot of my students are all in those online kind of like messaging apps. If you want to send me them or send them to other students, fantastic, do that. Number 2, get someone to test you on the material. If you've all filled in your A3 summary sheet, all of the right answer is there for you. So stick it in front of your mum or your dad and say to them, can you please just test me on this, okay? Anyone will do. Or number 3, which I bet nobody will do, is practice your 12 markers. You've filled in essay templates, you've told me what you would say if that question were to come up. You know that you're going to do one of those questions under timed conditions. Are you actually brave enough at this point in time to be practicing those in your own time under timed conditions? Give it a whirl, alright? I promise you it will help you. Okay, good luck with all this material, and we'll see you after the half-term holidays.